ini nggak timingin nggak?
Boleh.
Excellencies,
Ambassadors,
distinguished guests,
ladies and gentlemen,
Ohio listeners,
good morning.
and welcome. My name is Ray,
My name is Kiara.
and we will be
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, the event is about to begin in a moment.
Please enter the room and be seated. Thank you.
To all the audience who are still outside the room, please come to the room because the event is about to begin. Thank you.
Iya. Sebentar lagi kita ngomong aja.
Cindy, ada Asyar Foye kan? Asyar Foye, suruh masuk.
Oke.
Dia kedengeran begitu.
It's okay. Please be seated juga nggak?
Yes, please be seated.
Please be seated. Please have a seat. Please be seated. Yes, it's okay. Teleponnya berdua.
Berlebihan. Tahan yuk.
Sesi satu.
Personal banget. Kita tetap masuk strategi sih. Negara-negara yang emang pengen punya have a say gitu, kita pasti datanginnya have a say. Iya.
Ladies and gentlemen, as the event is about to begin, we would like to ask you to please come into the room and be seated. Thank you.
Let's give a big round of applause to our speakers.
Speaker siapa siapa? Speaker.
To our honorable guest today.
Oke.
Tolong dibukain dong, masih gimana sih? Diem dong. Harus diganjel memang, diganjel. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a big round of applause to our honorable guest today. Once again, please welcome to our honorable guest today. Yes.
Oh iya, right.
Banget sih. Excellencies,
Ambassadors,
distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Ohayo gozaimasu
good morning
and welcome. My name is Ray,
My name is Kiara.
and we will be the master of ceremony for today's event. I hope everybody is doing well, staying in high spirits, and ready for our celebration today.
Ladies and gentlemen, the mission of Japan to ASEAN and Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia are pleased to co-host the Commemorative Symposium of the 50th year of ASEAN-Japan Friendship and Cooperation entitled Golden Friendship with the Epicentrum of Growth.
Throughout the past 50 years, the relationship between ASEAN and Japan has continued to develop. Taking the opportunity this year, the government of Japan will work with ASEAN to promote various commemorative events to highlight and further strengthen the long-standing relations between ASEAN and Japan.
Yes, that's right. And the symposium is a major kick-off event in Jakarta to deepen the understanding of the development of the ASEAN-Japan relationship for half a century and to discuss the way forward to elevate it to a new stage to promote peace, stability, and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region and beyond.
Ladies and gentlemen, the symposium will feature two main sessions. And before we move forward, please allow me to welcome the co-host for today's event.
His Excellency, Mr. Kiya Masahiko, the Ambassador of Japan to ASEAN.
Please give a big round of applause. Also, Dr. Dino Patijalal, the founder and chairman of Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia. Welcome, Excellencies.
We also would like to welcome our honorable guest, His Excellency Dr. Ko Kim Horn, the Secretary General of ASEAN. Welcome, Excellency. And last but not least, we also would like to extend our gratitude to our panelists, the experts, researchers, and practitioners, and all participants who are tuning in to our event, both live in this venue as well as those joining us online. Please give a round of applause to all of us.
And now I would like to invite Dr. Dino Patijalal, the founder and chairman of FPCI and the co-host of today's event, to deliver his remarks. Dr. Dino, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ray and Kiara. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning to all of you, and I'd like to begin by welcoming His Excellency Dr. Ko Kim Horn, Secretary General of ASEAN, and I want to congratulate you for your appointment. And I know you're going to like Jakarta, and you're very much among friends here, and I can guarantee you by the end of your term, your hair is going to turn all white, right? So I also want to welcome my good friend, His Excellency Kia Masahiko, Ambassador of Japan to ASEAN, and I want to thank you for all the friendship and cooperation within FPCI, which is the largest foreign policy organization in Southeast Asia, and Japan mission. So I want to say thank you and welcome to Director General Arto Sidarto, an old friend, and very much our policy on ASEAN is in good hands under your leadership. Welcome also to my former boss, Dr. Marty Natalagawa. I know he doesn't like to be praised, but in my view, you're definitely one of the best Director Generals, Indonesian Director Generals for ASEAN that we've had, and I know Pa Arto would also agree with that. Thank you also to Dr. Satvinder Singh, Deputy Secretary General of ASEAN. Thank you for joining us. James Villafuerte from ADB. Arima Yutaka, Director General of Southeast and Southwest Asian Affairs, coming from Tokyo. Thank you for joining us. Dr. Aizawa Nobuhiro from Kyushu University. Dr. Obami from Kanagawa University, and of course my good friend Dr. Titinan Pongsudirak from ISIS, Thailand. Welcome also to all ASEAN permanent representatives, ambassadors, students, and friends. We are here to celebrate 50 years of ASEAN-Japan relations. 50 years is a long time. In marriage, 50 years is called a golden achievement, right? It's a great thing, but I also think 50 years also mean 2 generations, assuming one generation has a 25 years span, right? 1 century, 4 generations. So 50 years is 2 generations. And in that 50 years, ASEAN has grown from 5 to 6 to 10 members. And ASEAN has transformed Southeast Asia from a divided and tormented region to a vibrant and peaceful community. And as a result, ASEAN has helped change the world for the better. 50 years is indeed a long time. Cities have been built in that time span. Countries and regions have changed. Strategic landscapes have evolved. And perceptions and diplomatic bonds have also grown. The perception of Japan to today's Indonesians is very different than perception held by the first generation of Republican Indonesians in 1945. And this is certainly the story of ASEAN-Japan relationship. It is more than just a story of diplomatic progression. It is indeed a remarkable historical journey. As we discuss ASEAN-Japan relations today, there are several features that are worth highlighting about this important relationship over the last 5 decades. Let me share with you what I think they are. First, it is a relationship that is long and deep. There was a time when Japan had a succession of prime ministers, and I lost track of naming who would be the Japanese foreign minister, prime minister. But no matter what the political temperature in Tokyo is, Japan's attention to ASEAN, to Southeast Asia, has always been consistent. Right? Japan really understands geopolitically and economically that Southeast Asia, ASEAN, is really an important part of the world for Japan. Japan is the first dialogue partner to appoint an ambassador to be Japan's permanent Jakarta-based representative. And this relationship is also deep because it has deep roots in business, people-to-people relationship, and also civil societies. It is also deep because the economic relationship is resilient. During the pandemic time, in the last 2 or 3 years, Japan-ASEAN trade remains strong. And Japan is Japan-ASEAN trade recorded about $240 billion, right? The third largest for ASEAN. And Japan, in terms of foreign direct investment, was the fourth largest for ASEAN, with about $12 billion. And secondly, the relationship between ASEAN and Japan is steady and reliable. I work with Japan on many occasions, Japan government, and there's something about Japan's diplomatic culture that is unique in my view. The Japanese, they work quietly, they're not imposing, and they are, although this sounds cliche or flowery, they have a lot of goodwill and sincerity, and this shows in our relationship with them. And I think this is reflected in the fact that the strategic trust between ASEAN and Japan has definitely grown in the last 50 years. But Marty speaks a lot about the strategic trust, and I think he would also agree that Japan is good not just in earning their strategic trust, but also maintaining it. The third feature of ASEAN-Japan relationship is that it is forward-looking and constructive. Japan and Southeast Asian countries have a difficult, some say also painful relations in the past. But if you look at how ASEAN-Japan relationships are today, what is remarkable is that you don't see or feel any historical baggage, right? There's very strong attitude of just looking to the future in a forward-looking manner and in a constructive way, and always focusing on what is the problem and what is the solution that we can work on together. And the fourth aspect is that ASEAN-Japan relations is definitely strategic because it relates to the architecture of the region. Japan is active partner in all ASEAN-led mechanisms, the ARF, the ASEAN Plus 3, the East Asia Summit, the ADMM Plus, the expanded ASEAN Maritime Forum, and so on. And Japan is a firm believer in ASEAN centrality. I remember during the Myanmar crisis, I asked a Japanese official, what is Japan's position? And his answer is, well, Tokyo will follow whatever ASEAN decides. ASEAN will take the lead. ASEAN needs to always demonstrate its centrality, and Tokyo will never be one step ahead of ASEAN. So on the AOIP as well, Japan is very committed to support the outlook with a joint statement on cooperation on AOIP. And we know there's a lot of different versions of AOIP, from the American, Australian, Indian, Japanese, the ASEAN, EU, German, British, what have you. And this is still a work in progress. ASEAN will very much try under Indonesia's leadership to move the needle forward. And I do believe that ASEAN-Japan cooperation and understanding on the Indo-Pacific will be an important part of that dynamic, especially in making sure that AOIP, or the Indo-Pacific, will deliver a region that is inclusive and marked by cooperation. This symposium aims to highlight the key achievements of ASEAN-Japan relationships and to discuss the way forward. We will watch a video screening about the 50 year of friendship and cooperation between ASEAN and Japan. And I'm happy to report that today we have nearly 200 participants. And to represent the future of our relationship, we have 30 students who are coming from 5 universities in and around Jakarta. This symposium is also being watched by nearly 300 participants from 29 countries. So we have participants tuning in from live from Japan, Malaysia, Philippines, Vietnam, Cambodia, Timor-Leste, Bangladesh, Bulgaria, Egypt, Nigeria, Netherlands, Portugal, Saudi Arabia, US, and the UK. And hello to all of you who are watching this online. And today we will have 2 panel discussions. The first one is about realizing sustainable and resilient society for the epicentrum of growth, which is the major theme of ASEAN under Indonesia's chairmanship this year, and how to make the most of AOIP cooperation. And the second session will talk about realizing regional peace and stability for the epicentrum of growth and how to make the most out of ASEAN-led mechanism and initiatives. One final thought from me, look, ASEAN-Japan relationship, I know we're going to talk about economic projects, diplomatic cooperation, and so on. But really, and I say this a lot when we talk about foreign policy, the real measurement of ASEAN-Japan relationship is really whether or not that relationship has soul, right? S-O-U-L, right? Relationship is like a marriage, right? You may be married to someone for 10, 20, 50 years, right? But do you have an understanding? Do you have love? Do you have trust between you and your spouse, right? So that is what soul is about. It's about a relationship that is marked with understanding, mutual understanding, a strong sense that our success depend on one another, and treating each other as equals and as partners in progress, and also feeling your pain, right? So this is the importance of having a soul of the relationship. And I do hope that as we discuss how ASEAN-Japan relations have evolved in the last 5 decades and how will it evolve in the next 5 decades, we have an understanding of what drives and substantiate that soul and how do we evolve it to a higher place. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your remarks, Dr. Dino. And now we would like to invite His Excellency Dr. Kao Kim Hoon, the Secretary General of ASEAN, to deliver his remarks. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Your Excellency Kaya Masahiko, Ambassador of Japan to ASEAN. Your Excellency Orawadi Sriparomuju, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of the Kingdom of Thailand to ASEAN. Excellencies, Ambassador of ASEAN, Permanent Representative to ASEAN, our CPR. Excellency Dr. Dino Pati Dijala, founder and chairman of the Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia. Excellency Sidato Suryo Dipuro, the senior official, some leader from Indonesia. Excellency Dr. Mati, Dr. Ligawa, former Minister of Indonesia, is my dear friend, of course. I have a lot of friends here this morning. I could already just met up earlier. Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and friends. And a good morning to all of you. I'm pleased to join you this morning at this symposium on the 50th year of ASEAN-Japan friendship and cooperation. Allow me to begin by expressing my appreciation to the mission of Japan and the Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia for organizing this important event. This symposium is one of the many events this year to commemorate a half a century worth of cooperation and joint activities between ASEAN and Japan. It's also an ideal platform for us to take stock of our achievements and engagement, as well as discuss ways to strengthen ASEAN-Japan relations in moving forward. The journey building friendly and robust ties shared between ASEAN and Japan has been the results of the cultivated efforts that dates back to 1973, when both sides established an informal dialogue relationship. The relations were subsequently formalized in 1977, in the same year when the Fukuda Doctrine, where Japan's foreign policy approach towards building a heart-to-heart relationship with the ASEAN region based on equal partnership. Since then, our relations have evolved and led to many significant achievements, and our cooperation has been continued to grow and expand from strength to strength. These milestone achievements include, among other things, the Tokyo Declaration for the Dynamic and Enduring ASEAN-Japan Partnership in the New Millennium in 2003, the issuance of a joint declaration for enhancing ASEAN-Japan strategic partnership for prospering together in 2011, as well as the adoption of the vision statement on the ASEAN-Japan Friendship and Cooperation and its implementation plan in 2013. Furthermore, in 2020, our leaders adopted the joint statement on cooperation on the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific, which enabled the enhancement of our practical cooperations. I think particularly in 50 years, we can say that the relations have been built up on and have grown based on what I would call the four important factors. One, of course, is trust, which is the foundation of this relationship. Trust. There's a lot of mutual trust there. There's a lot of trust between leaders of the two sides, and of course also the officials and the people. The second factor is based on friendship. I think friendship goes a long way if we're looking at the relationship, particularly people to people. We've seen a lot of, first of all, even as intellectuals who went to study in Japan at a number of Japanese universities, but also you've seen a lot of Japanese tourists visiting ASEAN member states. So there's a lot of friendship there, I think, over the last 50 years. Third, of course, based on partnership. And this partnership is at all levels, in the different sectors, across the sectors. So this partnership has not come about without a lot of investment. The investment is not just only in the talk about ODA or investment in terms of the actual private investment, but investment in terms of times and efforts on both sides. And finally, I think the achievements here also based particularly on the goodwill. There's a lot of goodwill on both sides, ASEAN and Japan. Our economic and trade relations have also progressed well. In 2021, two-way trade between ASEAN and Japan reached $240.2 billion, with an increase of 17.2% year-on, surpassing pre-pandemic levels. In the same year, the total foreign direct investment inflows from Japan amounted to $12 billion, which represents an increase of 3.5% year-on. These positive developments, despite various regional and global challenges, have placed Japan as ASEAN's third largest trading partner and the fourth largest external source of FDI among ASEAN dialogue partner countries. We have also witnessed a strong manifestation of our solidarity and friendship, especially during these challenging times. This was recently demonstrated by Japan's invaluable assistance to support ASEAN's efforts in addressing and mitigating the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, including through the implementation of the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework, contributions to COVID-19 ASEAN Response Funds, the procurement of vaccines, and the supports toward the ASEAN Center for Public Health Emergencies and Emerging Diseases. including through the dispatch of health experts from Japan to the ASEAN member states. Indeed, all of these efforts undoubtedly demonstrate our mutual commitment to deepen and broaden the ASEAN-Japan relationship for peace, stability, and prosperity in the region. I particularly welcome Japan's continued support for ASEAN centrality, including through its active participation in ASEAN-led mechanisms, as well as its important contribution to the ASEAN community building and ASEAN integration process. I think in this area, we can see that Japan is very much leading in supporting the ASEAN integration and ASEAN community building. There's a lot of projects and activities, particularly also supporting the sub-regional frameworks also, the sub-regional cooperations, which are the building blocks of ASEAN community building. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, today ASEAN-Japan relations have grown to be one of the most dynamic and substantive partnerships in the region. Our shared accomplishments in the past five decades have laid a strong foundation for advancing our relations, cooperation, and partnership in the years to come, which is very timely as we continue to face a number of common challenges that require greater coordinated actions, such as in the areas of climate change, food and energy security, public health, and demographic change, among others. Accordingly, ASEAN looks forward to further strengthening our partnership with Japan, including advancing practical cooperation in areas such as trade and investment, tourism, disaster management, digitalization, and technological innovation, people-to-people, and cultural exchanges, as well as through concrete collaboration in the key areas of the AOIP, such as maritime cooperation and sustainable development. The ASEAN foreign ministers have just working on this, decided on this already in the area, the 544 priority areas where we need to focus on, including the practical framework. So I think we hope Japan will look at those 5 areas of priorities and support them as well. For example, in addition to implementing the regional comprehensive economic partnership to boost trade and investment between the two sides, ASEAN and also looks forward towards the potential expansion of the ASEAN single window with Japan in order to better enable trade facilitation in the new normal. We want to see more trade and investment in Japan. The past 50 years, we've done a lot already, we've done a lot, but the next 50 years, we hope we can do a lot more. Meanwhile, as far as digitalization and technological innovation are concerned, apart from supporting key ASEAN initiatives in these areas, such as the consolidated strategy on the 4th industrial revolution for ASEAN, and the necessary Big One roadmap on ASEAN digital transformation, we also look forward to the inauguration of ASEAN-Japan Year for Science, Technology, and Innovation this year, so that it could help pave the way for enhanced partnership in cutting-edge technologies in the areas of artificial intelligence, robotics, advanced manufacturing, automotive, medical technology, and space exploration. Finally, with our goal to position ASEAN to be future-ready, sustainability must be embedded in all of our initiatives between ASEAN and Japan. While implementing the first phase of the framework of circular economy for the ASEAN economic community, work is ongoing for ASEAN to develop its carbon neutrality strategy and ASEAN framework for blue economy. Of course, the blue economy, we have 9 ASEAN member states that have access to ocean, and Japan, of course, you are an ocean nation state. So that's where the blue economy is a new area that we can cooperate. The latter, which is a key enabler for the region to establish a new source of sustainable economic growth. Leveraging on Japan's long-term engagement with ASEAN, we welcome Japan's robust support toward ASEAN low-carbon future. It is against this backdrop that ASEAN also welcomes Japan's intention to establish an ASEAN-Japan comprehensive strategic partnership, hopefully later this year. And we also look forward to work closely with you towards that goal as we focus on the deliverable this year. Likewise, we look forward to the successful convening of the Commemorative Summit, which is scheduled to be held in Tokyo in December. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, I'm convinced that the future of the ASEAN-Japan strategic partnership remains bright and full of potentials and opportunities. Japan is a solid friend, a good neighbor, and a long-term partner of ASEAN. So with that, through this symposium, I hope that the discussion here today will bear more fruits, more activities, and more initiatives that will enable us to foster stronger relations. I believe that it's through greater cooperation that we can realize a more resilient partnership that promotes greater peace, stability, and prosperity in this region and the wider world. Because at the moment, you can see already there's a lot of tensions in the region. And certainly, of course, we cannot take peace and stability and security for granted. So we need to work together very closely to ensure that we have enduring peace in our part of the world here. With that, I wish the symposium a great success with fruitful outcomes. Thank you very much and good morning.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your insightful remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, before we start the video screening, we are going to have a quick group photo. And with that, we would like to invite all of our honorable guests who are sitting on the front row seats to come up to the stage. To ushers, please help assist. We would like to invite all the honorable guests on the front row seats to come up to the stage for a quick group photo. Yes. All the photographers, please get ready. And please give the best smile. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay? Yes. Ladies and gentlemen. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yes.
The ASEAN pose.
With the ASEAN pose. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Great. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a big round of applause. Yeah. Yes. And to all of our honorable guests, please be seated. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, and now before we move on, we would like to show a video highlighting the 50th year of ASEAN-Japan friendship and cooperation. Please enjoy.
As ASEAN has continued to develop since its founding in 1967, Japan's relationship with the region has been strengthened into a strategic partnership based on long-standing friendship and comprehensive cooperation. The Fukuda Doctrine of 1977 set the foundation of Japan's engagement with the Southeast Asian countries. A heart-to-heart relationship still remains as a pillar of Japan's partnerships with ASEAN.
日本と ASEAN は半世紀にわたり心と心のつながる真の友人として地域の平和と安定繁栄のために 協力してきました。アジア通貨危機、インド洋大津波、東日本大震災、新型コロナ感染拡大といった大きな危機の際には、互いに手を差し伸べてきました。
ASEAN and Japan have been cooperating for ASEAN's community development and integration through a range of initiatives, programs, and funds. One such initiative is the Japan-ASEAN Integration Fund, JIF. JIF was established in 2006 to facilitate the efforts of the ASEAN member states to pursue the comprehensive integration of ASEAN and promote cooperation between Japan and ASEAN. Supported by JIF, the Genesis program fosters solidarity through large-scale youth exchange. The year 2013 marked 40 years of ASEAN-Japan friendship and cooperation, and the vision statement was adopted by the leaders of ASEAN and Japan. Since then, ASEAN-Japan relations have made significant progress through comprehensive cooperation in line with the 4 partnerships described in the vision statement. In 2020, ASEAN and Japan issued the joint statement of the 23rd ASEAN-Japan Summit on Cooperation on ASEAN Outlook on the Indo-Pacific, AOIP, noting that both the AOIP and Japan's Free and Open Indo-Pacific, FOIP concept, share relevant fundamental principles in promoting peace and cooperation.
日本が推進する自由で開かれたインド太平洋と ASEAN が示したインド太平洋に関するASEAN アウトルックは本質的な原則を共有しています。
The 4 priority areas outlined in the AOIP are maritime cooperation, connectivity, UN Sustainable Development Goals 2030, economic and other possible areas of cooperation. A variety of JIF projects have been designed to address maritime issues such as navigation safety and marine pollution. One example is the Joint Hydrographic Survey of the Straits of Malacca in Singapore, which aims to enhance the safety of navigation and smooth and uninterrupted passage, as well as to improve the protection of the marine environment in the straits.
Japan and JIF have made a significant contribution to the project. Getting new and accurate charts through the Joint Hydrographic Survey and the enhanced navigational safety will help protect the marine environment of storms.
JIF projects also seek to promote ASEAN integration and narrow development gaps through greater connectivity. The project Global Navigation Satellite System GNSS Implementation Plan Training in ASEAN, JIPTA, seeks to enhance safety and security of air transport in the ASEAN region through training using the Global Navigation Satellite System.
But GNSS generally refers to a constellation of satellites which provides position, navigation, and timing information. The goals of GIPTA is to provide training for engineering staff, administrators, and government regulators on how to help them plan to implement GNSS in their respective countries. Because if had not been for Japan, GIPTA would not have been possible. This just shows the commitment of Japan and its strong ties to its ASEAN neighbors.
JIF projects that underpin the UN Sustainable Development Goals seek to realize the pledge to leave no one behind in eradicating poverty and creating a more sustainable world. Supporting the establishment of the ASEAN Center for Public Health Emergencies and Emerging Diseases, ARAC-FEED, will contribute to capacity building in the region to respond to public health emergencies, including future pandemics of infectious diseases.
The idea of having ACFED in all its current form was really pushed by the support of Japan. Japan became instrumental in realizing this idea, this dream, if you want. Japan's support provided the impetus to get the ball rolling into the realization of ACFED.
JIF also assists ASEAN member states in other essential areas of economic development. One such initiative is the ASEAN-Japan Cybersecurity Capacity Building Center, which works to enhance the capacity of cybersecurity experts and specialists for protecting their own government systems and critical information infrastructure.
Japan plays a major role in setting up the ASEAN-Japan Cybersecurity Capacity Building Center, and Japan has generously provided funding to set up this center, and also they offer courses under this center. And with all these activities, we have already created 860 cybersecurity professionals. The collaboration between Japan and ASEAN would make a contribution to the global safety starting from this region.
Through initiatives such as these, undertaken in the spirit of the heart-to-heart relationship, the government of Japan has worked closely with ASEAN for the integration, peace, and prosperity in the region.
ASEAN-Japan relations have made remarkable achievements in the past 50 years. Our partnership has been consistently broadened to cover a wide range of areas of mutually beneficial cooperation. ASEAN appreciates Japan's contribution to ASEAN community building and integration, including through programs, projects, and activities supported by the Japan-ASEAN Integration Fund, JAIF. We look forward to further strengthening the partnership and cooperation, including through the ASEAN Outlook on the Indo-Pacific, AOIP, particularly in areas such as maritime cooperation, sustainable development, economic cooperation, and post-pandemic recovery.
日本 ASEAN 友好協力50周年の歴史的な節目に、そしてルールに基づく自由で開かれた国際秩序が重大な挑戦を受けている今こそ、共に新たなビジョンを打ち出し、新たな歩みを進めていきたいと思います。
Ladies and gentlemen, to commemorate the 50th year of ASEAN-Japan relations, we have special messages from our foreign ministers today. Firstly, please welcome a message by His Excellency Hayashi Yoshimasa, the Foreign Minister of Japan.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, and my fellow citizens of Japan and ASEAN, I am honored to have this opportunity to address you for this commemorative event that celebrates the 50th year of ASEAN-Japan friendship and cooperation. Japan was the first country in the world to become a partner of ASEAN. In the half-century since then, Japan and ASEAN have been working together not only as close business partners, but also as true friends with heart-to-heart relations, and cooperated hand in hand for peace, stability, and prosperity of the region, even in times of difficulty. Encouraged by the dramatic development of the ASEAN countries, our region has now become the center of the ever-expanding global economy. As we look around the world, we are at a turning point in history and era, facing a difficult situation where various issues, including Russia's aggression against Ukraine, are intricately intertwined. It is important that Japan and ASEAN continue to grow together based on mutual trust and respect, upholding the diversity and inclusiveness, and to lead the way in this new era. Around December this year, we will hold a commemorative summit in Tokyo to mark the 50th year of ASEAN-Japan partnership. At that time, we will jointly announce a new vision for cooperation for the next 50 years, taking into account the critical international situation at this pivotal time. Japan has launched the Free and Open Indo-Pacific, FOIP, and ASEAN has launched the ASEAN Outlook on the Indo-Pacific, AOIP. The principles shared by the two initiatives, such as openness, transparency, inclusiveness, and respect for international law, are important ideas in this new era, and close cooperation between Japan and ASEAN based on these principles is becoming increasingly important. In order to contribute to the maintenance and strengthening of a free and open international order based on the rule of law, we should mainstream the AOIP in the cooperation between ASEAN and all the external partners. Such cooperation should be in line with the principles and priority areas of the AOIP. Japan will take the lead in supporting the mainstreaming of AOIP. Our effort consists of 3 pillars. First, we will promote concrete cooperation projects in line with the 4 priority areas of the AOIP, namely maritime cooperation, connectivity, SDGs, and economic and other possible area of cooperation. We will work with ASEAN to identify specific projects to be announced at the Commemorative Summit, taking into account the new FOIP plan, which will be developed by Japan this spring. Those projects will implement the new vision to be issued on the occasion of the 50th year. Second, we will support the functions of the ASEAN Secretariat for the promotion and mainstreaming of the AOIP. We would like to consider providing technical assistance to enhance the capacity of the Secretariat. Third, we will support the human resource development of young government officials in ASEAN countries with a focus on the AOIP. We would like to consider assisting ongoing ASEAN programs and also consider starting new programs to provide training. Japan will take the opportunity of the 50th commemorative year to strongly promote these efforts in close dialogue with the ASEAN side and based on their needs. Golden friendship, golden opportunities. The catchphrase of the 50th year accurately describes the ASEAN-Japan relations. Japan would like to move forward with the people of ASEAN so that we can lead a new era and grow together. I hope that all of you who are here today will continue to support us in furthering the relationship and cooperation between Japan and ASEAN. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Foreign Minister Hayashi. Ladies and gentlemen, now we would like to welcome a message from the Foreign Minister of Indonesia, Her Excellency Retno Marsudi.
For the 5 decades, ASEAN and Japan have been the anchor of peace, stability, and prosperity in the region. We share the same vision to build a strong and resilient regional architecture based on inclusiveness, shared prosperity, and adherence to international law. Today, the world is facing enormous challenges. For the next 5 decades, it is up to us to choose whether we want to maintain peace and stability in the region or fall into conflict and hardship. For Indonesia and ASEAN, it is clear that we want to see peace, stability, and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region. Therefore, the paradigm of collaboration is a must. This year, Indonesia assumed the chairmanship in ASEAN. Indonesia designates the theme ASEAN Matters, Epicentrum of Growth. Indonesia counts on Japan's support to hand-in-hand with ASEAN build the Indo-Pacific region into an epicentrum of growth. I hope that ASEAN and Japan can strengthen their partnership based on mutual respect and mutual benefit. This is the only way that we can navigate these uncertain times. Happy 50th anniversary, ASEAN and Japan. Here is to a peaceful, stable, and prosperous region for 50 years and many more years to come. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Foreign Minister Marsudi. And now we would like to welcome a message from the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Thailand, His Excellency, Mr. Don Pramudwinai.
Excellencies, distinguished participants, warmest greetings from Thailand. At the outset, I wish to extend my congratulations on the 50th year of the ASEAN-Japan Friendship and Cooperation this year. It is indeed timely to reflect on our past achievements and chart our future directions, which I can see many golden opportunities in our golden friendship. Our long-standing relations have been built upon the basis of mutual confidence and trust, heart-to-heart understanding, and equal partnership. We shall further advance our strategic partnership, which is key to durable peace and shared prosperity in our region and beyond. Looking forward to the commemorative activities throughout this year and the commemorative summit in December in Tokyo. We need to work together on our new vision and work plan, particularly with Japan's intent to establish a comprehensive strategic partnership with ASEAN. Ladies and gentlemen, as the country coordinator, Thailand is committed to ensuring a great success of Golden Jubilee to strengthen our partnership with our peoples at heart. Let me now shed light on our priorities as follows. First, peace and stability are fundamental to our people's well-being. Considering Japan's strategic role in the dynamic geopolitics and the recent development in her security and defense strategies, ASEAN appreciates Japan's continued commitment to ASEAN centrality and the principles outlined in the ASEAN Outlook on the Indo-Pacific, or AOIP. Thailand supports Indonesia's effort in promoting concrete implementation of the AOIP, which provides a guide for intensifying win-win cooperation with ASEAN external partners to promote trust and confidence rather than rivalry and confrontation. In this regard, Thailand stands ready to work with ASEAN colleagues and Japan to enhance synergies of cooperation between the AOIP and Japan's free and open Indo-Pacific for our mutual benefit. Second, COVID-19 has reminded us of the necessity of international collaboration in response to crisis. ASEAN appreciates Japan's contributions to promoting regional health resilience and preparedness. Thailand therefore looks forward to an early conclusion of the establishment of the agreement and subsequent operationalization of the ASEAN Center for Public Health Emergencies and Emerging Diseases, or ACFED. Third, we must continue to achieve post-pandemic sustainable recovery and long-term resilience, particularly in enhancing supply chain connectivity by keeping our market open both offline and online. We encourage Japanese private sector to invest more in ASEAN as well as to support digital transformation for local entrepreneurs, MSMEs, and startups. Related to this, Thailand also envisions sustainability in all dimensions as our common agenda to promote human security in a well-balanced manner, taking into account the evident impacts of climate change, environmental degradation, and natural disaster, coupled with increased risk of food and energy insecurity. Thailand has proposed the Bio-Circular Green BCG economy model as an alternative strategy for sustainable recovery. We invite Japan to explore practical cooperation with ASEAN in this regard. And last but not least, our golden friendship has been nurtured from the heart. We should take this golden opportunity of our Golden Jubilee to further cultivate in our heart-to-heart partnership with our peoples at the center. Our commemorative activities here should reach out to all sectors of our peoples, whereby leaving no one behind. Thailand, therefore, plans to host an ASEAN-Japan Youth Camp on Sustainable Development this year to underline the role of the youth as an agent of change for a better future. Excellencies, distinguished participants, in closing, we are celebrating this historical milestone in our long-standing relations. Let us ensure that it is both memorable, and meaningful for our peoples. As the Japanese proverb says, there's nothing on this earth more to be prized than true friendship. Let us seize this golden opportunity to treasure our golden friendship and flourish it even further for our mutual benefit. I wish for a great success of this symposium today and throughout this year of ASEAN-Japan 50th anniversary. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Ladies and gentlemen, now we will have the first session on realizing a sustainable and resilient society for the epicentrum of growth, how to make the most of AOIP cooperation.
The first session will be moderated by Ms. Juwita Muhammad. She is the Director of the Economics and Business Unit and Director of Research of EDS Malaysia. Ms. Juwita, you may have the floor and take over.
Thank you, terima kasih, selamat pagi, and ohayo gozaimasu. I am Juwita, and I will be moderating this session this morning, and I would like to invite His Excellency Satvinder Singh, Dr. Aizawa Nobuhiro, and Mr. James Villafuerte to come up and have a seat with me on the stage. So, ladies and gentlemen, we do have a lot of things to talk about this morning, but let me just give you a bit of a background to the session this morning. So, as we can see, last year, 6 months into the year of 2022, the so-called endemic phase of the spread of COVID-19, where we saw higher levels of vaccination rates. We also observed the re-strengthening of the global economic growth with the loosening of COVID restrictions within ASEAN and beyond. Nevertheless, due to the externalities such as the war in Ukraine, rising global inflationary pressures, as well as the disruptions of the supply chain, the IMF has downgraded global growth significantly for the next year to come. Beyond 2023, global growth is forecasted to decline even further to only about 3.3% over the medium term. And the slowing down of the economy is observed by countries in the region already as early as the last quarter of 2022. So even though this region is relatively resilient compared to the major economies in Europe and also in the US, this year, the factors that I just mentioned will greatly influence the growth and also the strength of our region, ASEAN, and also our partners in the region. So given the limited amount of resources, it's important for ASEAN and also its +1 partners like Japan and also other dialogue partners to work together to address these issues and come up with timely remedies in the short to medium term. So on the theme of cooperation, today we will discuss about the importance of supporting ASEAN-led mechanism, including the AOIP, when we think about addressing the challenges like in terms of economic challenges and social challenges, as well as the supply chain bottlenecks, climate change, and also infectious diseases issues. So today we have 3 very esteemed panelists. His Excellency Satvinder Singh, the Deputy Secretary General for the AEC, Dr. Aizawa Nobuhiro, Professor at the Kyushu University, and also Mr. James Villafuerte, Principal Economist at the ADB, and welcome, gentlemen. So let's start the floor with you all giving a short and brief take on how you think we can leverage and maximize our potential and benefits using the AOIP platform. The floor is yours, sir.
Hello. Very good morning, everyone. Thank you, Janita, for first giving me the opportunity to speak. Very good morning, Secretary General. Good to see you open and giving us strong encouragement. His Excellency, Ambassador Kia, all of the distinguished leaders and officials from Japan that are here today. Of course, Ambassador Sudadipuro, Ambassador Derry, and Dr. Dino, the chairs for ASEAN, including our Ambassador Urawadi, our country coordinator for ASEAN for Japan, distinguished excellencies, dear friends of the CPR, the ambassadors of ASEAN fraternities. Great to see you all here this morning. And I'm glad to know that a lot of people in the room here, of course, people dialing in, are listening in to us. So a very good morning to all of you. Let me share this occasion to look forward and kind of share with you a bit of our thinking in terms of the elevation of the ASEAN-Japan economic relationship in context of the AOIP. As you know, these are all some of our key foundations of the 50th year celebrations and summits that are coming here. I think it's good that this morning we are discussing all of these issues. Japan, as you know, as SG has mentioned, is a very important economic partner for ASEAN, third largest trading partner and the fourth largest external source of FDI among all of our ASEAN dialogue partners. More importantly, Japan is a very strong supporter of the ASEAN outlook on Indo-Pacific, which is reflected through its support from the videos, and you've seen the deep synergy that is there between our two regions. Again, as Indonesia takes on our chairmanship this year, there's also a very strong determination to approach the Indo-Pacific region with a paradigm of collaboration centered on inclusive economic development. And in this regard, I think we need to explore innovative approaches that could support our ASEAN initiatives to mainstream AOIP even further. Moreover, the 50th year to this year again provides us the momentum to further enhance this cooperation, especially on emerging economic issues. Ladies and gentlemen, notwithstanding these close relations between our two regions, we all face global challenges. There are risks undermining economic recovery and integration in the Indo-Pacific region. We all are aware of the perfect storm of the geopolitical conflicts, coupled with existing trade tensions, the technological divergence, as well as climate change issues. They are all already causing supply chain disruptions. They are causing food and energy insecurity, and of course, the reversal of human development achievements for the region. Secondly, globally, as you all know, economic recovery from COVID-19 globally still remains fragile. In fact, the latest forecast of the World Bank indicates a very sharp, global prolonged slowdown and a global growth declining to almost 1.7% this year. So amid all of these uncertainties, I think the call for us to mainstream the cooperation under AOIP, it's truly an important opportunity for the region to address the above global challenges in a much more comprehensive and inclusive manner. And therefore, ASEAN will encourage all our external partners, including Japan, to take tangible initiatives in the four AOIP priority areas we've been mentioned in the videos also. In this regard, let me take the opportunity this morning to share our thoughts on how ASEAN what ASEAN-Japan future cooperation could look like, in terms of a strengthened position. I think firstly, I believe that our future cooperation should continue contributing to the principle of trade openness in the region. This is extremely critical. I think with the regional comprehensive economic partnership having entered into force in 2022, this again, I think this is where ASEAN's relevance again has definitely strengthened for Japanese private sector, as ASEAN is seen as an alternative, strategic and stable region for manufacturing supply chain. I say this because in the last 20 years, a lot of manufacturing supply chains have taken shape in East Asia, North Asia, and not so much in our region. Therefore, we are looking forward as in the next coming years as RCEP is again, we are beginning to already feel that it's facilitating and securing access for many of the Japanese businesses to consolidate into the ASEAN region in order to enjoy reduced tariffs and commitments of all of our RCEP partners in ASEAN, and also to further enjoy greater efficiencies in trade facilitations, especially in border clearances for goods. I think this is where ASEAN and Japan collaborations need to ensure that the RCEP is fully implemented well for our business sectors to take full advantage and to achieve meaningful trade and investment growth for the region. I think while you can see trade growing distinctively well, I think in FDI, I think this is where we are really looking for greater amount of Japanese engagement in the region. We feel that this is where the need for Japanese businesses to look to diversification, and of course the need for Japanese business to look to reorganize their supply chains in order to meet some of the low carbon requirements. It's a perfect storm, a perfect opportunity at the same time for us to start looking at how we will be able to take advantage of our economic and investment ties to deepen them. Secondly, I feel we also need to utilize the digital technology and our initiatives together to create reliable, resilient, and transparent supply chain in the region. SG spoke about the ASEAN single window this morning that has led to the digitalizations of our trade documentation. As we speak, 10 of the ASEAN member states are all connected to the ASEAN single window. And we all know how important this brings in terms of cost savings, deep impact to the business community. I think this is where, as what SG has recommended, I think it's an opportune time for us, for ASEAN and Japan, not to look back, but really take the leadership to further connect ourselves directly even stronger on the ASEAN single window and get our economies a lot more connected. I think in terms of prioritization, we really need to put this up there in terms of what we need to achieve economically. And as ASEAN moves to integrate even further, I think I just want to let you know that this year we are also working on a regional digital agreement, DEFA, and we are currently working on this directional study that's going to guide us on the scoping and some of the guiding principles of what the negotiators are going to be doing in terms of doing the launch of this agreement, this DEFA agreement for ASEAN. Again, this is going to be a great opportunity for Japan and all your institutions to study deeper on how you can be part of our journey of transformation that's going to be undertaken with the DEFA. And again, the areas that DEFA is going to cover is ranging from things like data movement, the treatment of data centers, e-commerce, cybersecurity, cross-border digital payments, including digital trade. So clearly there's a huge opportunity for us to regionally integrate ourselves a lot better in the coming years. And I do urge you all to look at what's coming in terms of the digital agreement. Finally, there's also going to be enormous opportunities of synergies for our region to look at the green transition part. I really, you've seen, and I really want to just echo what SG has mentioned this morning, there's an extensive opportunity for Japan to support in the implementation of our ASEAN Blue Economic Framework, which is one of the deliverables of Indonesia's chairmanship this year. Once the framework is going to be developed, there's going to be a lot of opportunity again for Japan to be participating in the implementation of the blue economy strategies. And again, I will say this is where it's not just blue economy, there's a lot more to do under the Green Initiative. I think while ASEAN member states and Japan, we all have our respective climate commitments, there's a huge opportunity for regional collaboration to further enhance our resource optimization and also leverage the existing advantages in technology and know-how. I always share with my teams, when it comes to planning for the low carbon future, Japan and ASEAN region, we actually have a lot of similar challenges, and limitations. And therefore, the way we look at planning for low carbon future, the way we are thinking of how we need to deal with low carbon planning, I think there's so much of similarity and a lot more what I call affinity, and that's where the opportunities are going to come. Now, where I want to just highlight the two additional areas of collaboration in the implementation of the framework, first of all, for circular economy, as well as our upcoming ASEAN carbon neutrality strategy, which SG also mentioned. As you all know, we actually have already welcomed the concept note that Japan has came forward with on the ASEAN Circular Economic Initiative. We believe that this is going to be very important in establishing almost the direction of how we need to manage our supply chain of electronic waste and reprocessing in the region. This is extremely complementary to both our Japan and ASEAN commitments that we have made at the Basel Convention. On carbon neutrality and also for the plan for low carbon future, ASEAN-Japan will also aim to establish very clear pathway to coordinate the green transition capital funds, as well as we also need to coordinate on how we need to develop de-risking funding that's required, that's needed for financing low carbon transformation. And this is a big opportunity, and we really need a lot of assistance from Japan and your institutions. There's a lot you can do in terms of helping us in planning for our low carbon transition. I would also think that moving forward, ladies and gentlemen, as we are confronted with this challenging future, I'm really confident that working hand in hand with Japan, we can really achieve our goal of greater economic integration for the Indo-Pacific. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for highlighting the ASEAN single window as well as the digital economy partnerships. Within ASEAN even, the issue on non-tariff measures have always been a prolonged and continued challenge for ASEAN. So I think through the digital economy partnerships as well, we can really tackle the issue of non-tariff measures as well as data localization and data transfers issue within ASEAN and also our partner Japan in the medium to long term. So I will move on to Aizawa Sensei. What is your take on the AOIP cooperation and how do you think we can make the most of it?
Thank you very much, Juita. Thank you very much for hosting this wonderful opportunity. Dr. Kao, the Secretary General of ASEAN, and Ambassador Kia, and also Dr. Dino Patjal. Thank you so much for hosting this. I really hate to talk after Excellency Sin. I think he covered all the points of what to do. So I think my task here is maybe highlight some of the how to do issues, maybe. Juita, you asked me about how to reap the benefits. So I think there's only one point I can emphasize here. It's the people. The Foreign Minister Hayashi has also emphasized the human capital development. I think that is really the key for ASEAN and AOIP in both ways. Why I say this, let me point three things. First, of course, it's the history. Dr. Dino talked about the 50-year marriage. I think during this marriage period, Southeast Asia has become one of the most peaceful, stable place in the world. I think the final state-to-state interstate war in the region was 1979. Since then, of course, we have some internal conflicts here and there, but it has been one of the most remarkable history for 50 years. I think this cannot be ignored. And if you look at the past 25-year history, like from 1998, which was the big economic crisis, there's also the history of overcoming crisis in this region with the power of the intellectual caliber of Southeast Asian leaders and people. I'm one of the students of that. This is my 25th year since my first visit to Southeast Asia. So I'm halfway there, but So I cannot emphasize enough how the people here and the history that tells that Southeast Asian people can work together. You know, there's not major animosity between the country and this generation. So I think now is the golden opportunity, as the logo says, to be able to work together. And I think we shouldn't waste this golden opportunity. So in a historical context, you know, we should bet on this generation that is coming in the next 25 years to build this relationship strong. So that's the first historical background. The second reason I want to focus on the human capital development is because although there are golden ways ahead, but there is a big issue about inequality that will derail the kind of asset we have. You know, we have human capital, but of course we have to solve the inequality issue. You know, Indonesia led the G20, and then we highlight the Y20, all the speeches. They highlight all the inequality of opportunities, right? You know, post-COVID, how are we going to bounce back? In macro picture, yes, it's golden, but if you look at the micro picture, you know, we have a lot of inequality issues. I think when you talk about inequality, we always talk about income inequality, but the biggest inequality in this region is about access to science. I think the access to science in the future is going to be the key. Just one example, mRNA. You know, the COVID, what mattered so much was the vaccination, right? That's really about science. Who gets that vaccination? The current design of the world is not as equal as we hope for in access to science. When you talk about crisis management, it could be disaster, it could be pandemic, it could be, in many sorts of disaster, but we have so much technological approaches to solve the issue that we couldn't before. But it all comes with a basic condition of access to science. And I think the AOIP, our ASEAN-led mechanism, can and have to focus, how to kind of make all these private approaches have a public cause in bringing science to all. So I think that particular emphasis on science access will be the next fundamentals of peace and security, which ASEAN has developed so much. The third one also is very related to the science, which Excellency Singh has emphasized. Our economy is now going more led by digital economy. We have the term knowledge economy. So post-industrial economy, we have the knowledge economy that's leading a lot of marginal benefits onto this region. And of course, this young generation of Southeast Asia is reaping the benefit, leapfrogging. They're taking those innovations and their technology into their hands, and that's driving the economy forward. But the knowledge economy also is not just about data. It's more about the people who can utilize that data in a much more humanistic way as well. You already sense all these, the inequalities and also even the neo-colonialism about the digitalization and the centralization of force in digitalization, where you will have these people who are democratically compassionate using this technology can not just reap the benefits, but also creating a social stability using these knowledge economy. This has to come with an education, right? It's not like digital technology solve everything, but it also has to come with an education that has a region-wide understanding. We have to be very compassionate using this digital economy. So among the nationals, among the regional partners, I think this is where we, the AOIP or the ASEAN, have to promote. This is not just about the market-led approach, but we have all the holistic government, business, partnership that we are doing this digitalization, knowledge economy for more public goods as well. I think this is a forum, and this is the kind of structure that we could reap the benefits to answer your question. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Sensei. I agree with you. The digital economy is has a lot of potential, but then I think training and equal access to training as well as equal access to education on the digital economy is also very important, so that there is no one left behind, and that the digital divide at least and the inequality can be narrowed down between different countries within ASEAN. So James, what is your take on how to make the most out of the AOIP cooperation, looking at your own work at the ADB?
Thank you, Juwita, and thank you for the organizers of this commemorative symposium. We are really happy to be invited. I'll phrase my answer in three parts. The first part is probably I'll make a comment about the success of ASEAN in the last 50 years, because as we all know, ASEAN is quite used to facing so many economic crises, and probably in the last 50 years, it has faced 4 or 5 big crises. Then the second part is I will try to think ahead in terms of how will the next 50 years be different in terms of the challenges that the region will face, and then conclude with probably what does it mean for AOIP. If we look at ASEAN in the last 50 years, ASEAN has really been known as one of the regions that has grown out of economic crises, since the Asian financial crisis, the global financial crisis, the European debt crisis, the US PRC trade tension, and last but not the least, the pandemic. The region has always grown strongly, predicated on its strong performance of exports and deep manufacturing. And I think the policy support for this successful export-oriented and manufacturing-based growth recovery is actually the strong macroeconomic fundamentals in most of the ASEAN economy, the existence of large fiscal and foreign exchange buffers, the focus on sustained economic reforms to make market more efficient and also more competitive. And last but not the least, we are also endowed with very young and vibrant labor force. And also we are quite lucky that we are close to our neighbors, our friends, the +3 economy, in particular Japan, Korea, and China, which is an anchor for regional demand that substitutes global demand whenever there is a global crisis. So I think that's fairly a very unknown in terms of why the region has succeeded in the last 50 years. And of course, a big part of that has led to a very strong regional integration in the region and formation of bilateral FTAs and RTAs. But now the pandemic came and we saw that the premise of economic policies has changed. We are seeing a lot of geopolitical tension, and this is, I think, embodied in the Russian war in Ukraine. We are also seeing a fierce or stiff competition for resources, which are actually driving the price of energy and commodities globally at a very high level. And this is actually causing a lot of problems in our region in terms of food security. There is also the issue of, I think, fragmentation in terms of, I think, the step back to open rule-based trading system and the gravitation of economic trade and investment policies towards power-based system. And we are seeing this in terms of the US PRC trade tension, for example. And this is shaping investment and trade policies, right? Now, if we look at those quite deep, challenging economic context of growth in the next 50 years, what are the key areas that would be important for AOIP? Probably I also mentioned that one of the greatest challenges of this generation is actually our transition to net zero, because without the transition to net zero, the economic underpinning of growth will disappear. So I think what this means for the region and what this means for AOIC is that the region would have more difficult challenge accessing key resources and knowledge. One of the first key resource and knowledge that it has to access is mastery over climate mitigation and adaptation. And I think this Satvinder has talked about this, the importance of mobilizing finance, the importance of de-risking, providing sweeteners, or even contributing development funds so that private sector capital can follow. These are all needed, right? The second challenge, I think, and important is really how will the region be able to access technology, know-how, innovation that can help actually solve some of these big cross-border challenge. We know that without technology for clean energy, without technology on how to retire coal power plants, how to repurpose some of those assets, we won't be able to deliver the net transition. So I think that will be the second area. How do we use AOIP to access technology, know-how, and innovation in the region to support some of these important agenda? And I think the third challenge there is that more and more we realize, even at the ADB, that the money of development partners is not big enough to finance some of these needs. We need more deep and sustained engagement with the private sector. Without the private sector, we cannot probably deliver some of this money as well as deliver some of this technology. And if you look at the role of the private sector, particularly, for example, the private sector in Japan, historically, they have contributed knowledge, they have contributed capital through FDI, they have contributed technology that has helped the region transform its economy from an agrarian economy to an industrial region, right? So again, we have seen that this private sector knowledge has improved urban planning. It has also improved our response capability on disasters. It is now contributing in terms of enhancing energy efficiency, in terms of making transport connectivity more effective. No? So I think an area for AOIP is really how do we sustain and deepen the engagement with the private sector. I think that the third part is, I think, already mentioned by our professor, is human capital. And here I will probably bring in the gender agenda. We have been looking at labor force participation rate in the region in many of our countries. And we are seeing that without addressing the gender issue in the labor market, we won't be able to have enough manpower to support growth. Now in the region, we are seeing wage increases, and some of these are because of skill shortages. I think we need to provide for more flexible labor market policy so that women can participate more. Last but not the least, I think is really important of forging ahead multi-sectoral partnership. What we are dealing with are quite closely correlated issues. No? When we talk about climate change, when we talk about inequality, when we talk about economic growth, they're all interrelated. And without this multi-sectoral partnership, we won't be able to respond to all these challenges. I'll end my comment there, Rubita. Thanks.
Thank you, James. That's a long list of challenges right there. And yeah, thank you so much for highlighting the importance of the private sector. The ASEAN Secretariat, the government can only do so much, but it is actually the private sector that can put the wheels into motion for ASEAN and also the AOIP. So let me go straight to the first round of questions. So back to you, sir. So when we look at the economic and also social cooperation in the Indo-Pacific region with ASEAN at its center, how do you think we can expand or strengthen this partnership within a given sector? So I guess, how can we draw similarities? Are there similarities? Are there overlaps in terms of initiatives between the AEC blueprint as well as the AOIP?
A lot of the issues that we are discussing this morning, whether it's about inclusiveness, improving the lives of citizens, right? Bringing about security, safety to the region, bringing about peace as well as economic growth. I think they are all interrelated. I think it's silly to think that they are not connected. They are definitely connected to one another in many, many, many ways than many of us tend to think. I think the way ASEAN Secretariat today is structured, we actually have the three large pillars: the political, economic, and social cultural. But without fail, a lot of what we do today is totally interconnected. You know, all the pillars work quite closely with each other, and the issues that we are talking about today, whether it's going to be how to manage the low carbon future on sustainability, it's not possible for a social cultural team to just sit there and think about all the things that needs to be done in terms of our plans for the future without engaging the finance and economic sectors, right? Without finance and economic sectors in the front and center, we're not going to get that transformation implemented. I think similarly, I can bring many, many examples like digital intervention. I think if we don't work with social cultural unit in order to look at the human capacities, the economic sector is not going to be able to fully plan out all the requirements that are needed in our digital transformation. So I think the interconnectivity and the reliance on each other would remain. I think on the issue on AYP and all of the ASEAN-centered initiatives, as far as I'm concerned, AOIP is a complement to what we do in ASEAN. It's not something that's going to, each is not going to replace the other. Where I see it is, it's a partnership of complementarity. And obviously, the center stage of AOIP is still all about enhancing our ASEAN community building processes and reinforcing our ASEAN-centered regional architecture. I think that's the center stage, you know. So one doesn't replace the other, and even when there are going to be updates of our ASEAN initiatives, I think now, as you know, the AEC blueprint in 2025 is coming to an end, and we are already in the process of planning for the post-2025. But I think as we are doing that, naturally, AOIP oversight, it's always going to be there, complementing, hopefully, all the priorities of the ASEAN member states as they plan out the next stage of the blueprint. So that's how I see the relationship. It's a relationship of complementarity. One doesn't displace the other, and if anything, one is needed to reinforce the other. So I think when we are rolling out our initiatives, the key ASEAN initiatives, we really cannot do without the deep support of our partners. And the AOIP is just one of the frameworks that we depend on in order to execute and implement some of this work on the ground. Yeah.
Thank you, sir, for that intervention. I'm only bringing this up because at IDEAS we did look at the progress of the AEC blueprint, and there were at least 5 or 6 pillars, and we have a long way to go. So hopefully with the AOIP, maybe some forms of reforms and also collaboration can be expedited in terms of progress. May I go to Aizawa Sensei? While there are various ASEAN-related mechanisms, and you've looked into different types of ASEAN-Japan collaborations in different areas, what are the existing framework that you see that there's a lot of progress on, and what would be the new areas of collaboration in the next few years to come? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Juita. Yes, so yes, I think there's many promising mechanisms, but one thing I will hope to see develop is on, say, mechanism on urban issue collaboration. So ASEAN has smart city network, collaborations. I think urban governance is going to be really the key in the coming 2 decades or so. I know the COVID has, changed the course of urbanization a little bit, but I think the big trend of urbanization is going to be there. Look at like this Jakarta, Bandung area, it's going to be 75 million plus, population cluster. That's more than a country, right? So urban governance is going to be the key for both, not just social and economic stability, but also, political stability, the regional stability too. So building expertise, learning, success cases among the cities, I think that's going to be the key dialogue, practice sharing, like government support on each other. what I'm trying to say here is bringing the mayors back in the driver's seat, maybe. I think there are many forums that we have, head of state, national government, but I think we should engage more with mayors, governors, not only on the private city, because we already have a lot of forum on the private city, partnership, but maybe secondary, third level, mayors. I think we all acknowledge urban governance is going to be the key in this region, in the Pacific, and we should give more ownership to those, leaders, because they're not just governing their own places, but I think they're contributing to the more broader region. So I think that could be a new approach to strengthening the existing mechanism that ASEAN has. One maybe thing that I would like to propose here is, I think what ASEAN and the AOIP is building is political legitimacy. All of this could be transferred into political legitimacy. So one approach is, I would like to see say ASEAN annual report. Like, you have all these, like, the United States have TIP report, everybody talks about the report annually, right? I want to see an ASEAN report on, say, in the Pacific. So, say, ASEAN build up a bureau that has, like evaluate countries on openness, transparency, inclusivity, rule-based, for example, 4 issues. And then, ASEAN will always have attention that how ASEAN sees the world, the region, and how ASEAN evaluates, not ASEAN being evaluated. But I think this is a time that ASEAN should start, showing their voices. What are the legitimate ways of governance and so forth? It could be ASEAN Secretariat, it could be Padino's FCPI. I think there should be an agency here that you are the one to evaluate. And I think this moment of strengthening AOIP is a perfect timing. I don't know whether ASEAN wants to be evaluated among each other, but I'm sure the report, annual report, will give a very strong ownership. So, try to build up a legitimacy voice. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's an interesting proposal on an ASEAN annual report. James, you've looked at trade and also trade-related issues. What is your take on how ASEAN could move forward to promote cooperation with other agencies, international agencies like the UN, or in particular to achieve the SDGs when you mentioned about labor and also labor participation? Since we are talking about expanding partnerships, what would be the role of external partners? We've talked about Japan extensively, but what about China, which is a very close partner of ASEAN in terms of trade and also investments?
Thanks, Juwita. There's a lot of questions there, so let me unpack some of the individual questions a bit. I think, first of all, IOs really play a critical role in delivering SDGs. They are thought leaders and they help shape global and regional plans. They have the resources and also the expertise to monitor the progress or the lack of progress, to develop tools that help us understand success factors. They also mobilize development finance, which is very important. They organize regional and global dialogue. They help form partnerships towards some of the sectoral work program. And I think more importantly, they also deliver capacity building. So I think in all this area, ASEAN and AOIP should really partner with them, because one, we know the region more than some of these IOs. In particular, we need to customize some of the solutions, because there's no one size fits all. And I think that's where the role of the ASEAN will come in, is to provide a deep sectoral context, because we've been in the region for so long. I think in terms of specific area, one area that's really lacking specifically after the pandemic is the lack of data. We don't know, and we're having difficulty understanding the impact, because for some of our countries in the region, there's no data. And most of our economies don't have the capacity to really generate the data. So we should work with international organizations to close this data gap, because these will help us respond to challenges in terms of evidence-based. And so that's very important. We need their tools so that we can understand the present benchmark where the SDGs are, and also have the ability to predict what will be the SDG outcome in 2030, for example. So these are very important. I think the focus on data, the focus on developing indicators, the focus on tracking them, and the focus also in terms of trying to understand what are the different pathways to accelerating SDG, and what are the investment requirements, right? Because we know that money always delivers outcomes. So if there's no money, outcome will be limited. Presently, the commitment to delivering SDG are still way below our target. I think our target is about 0.7% of GDP. If I remember right, I think the present commitment is just around 0.33% of GDP. So it's like halfway what we know should be committed to SDG. And I think at the ADB, we are actually helping our member countries evaluate their options in terms of accessing aid and development finance to accelerate SDGs. So we are helping the Lao PDR, we're helping Mongolia, we're helping Nepal and Pakistan to understand how they can tap some of this money to deliver and accelerate the progress of SDG, and that's important. I think the second thing important for both AOIP and also ASEAN is to really embed SDG in all their reporting and monitoring templates, right? In all their multi-sectoral or MOU when they're partnering with other agencies. It has to be embedded in all the sectoral and the thematic work programs, because as we know, that's the only way that we can actually focus solely on accelerating SDG. At the ADB, we have done this. So at the ADB, all ADB's reporting monitoring template, even the President's recommendation for approval of projects, SDG targets are embedded. In all our sectoral programs, work programs, SDG targets are embedded. And ADB has also allotted high-level finance to support SDG. I'll stop there.
Okay, we have unfortunately come up to the end of the session, but before that, I would give each one of the speakers about 20 seconds to wrap up, and any last messages for the audience here and also online. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate how ASEAN, I think if you've seen the last 3 years, how growth has come back to the region through the hard work of the ASEAN member states. There's very few regions in the world that are doing 5% growth last year, 5.7 last year, and this year we're expecting 4.7 to 5.5%. So there are very few regions in the world that are experiencing the growth that we are seeing. So there are certain things that are put into place the last couple of years through the support of what we're doing with ourselves, the member states and our partners, that are really, we are enjoying the fruits today. Especially our open markets. Even today as we speak, we are going to be moving towards RCEP is done, and today we are actually looking at full implementation. But right now there's a huge amount of work being done in terms of upgrading the ATIGA, our biggest, most important FTA among the 10 countries, and also our ASEAN Plus FTAs, including the one with Japan, with China, even with our other partners. So clearly in terms of in the economic side, there are certain things that have been put into place that we are enjoying. I think in this transformation phase that we are talking about is huge challenge. And one of the biggest challenge in my mind, I think we need to be really watching, is really the ability for us to be able to generate the financing that's required to help us in the transformation. I think there's a strong will among member states to embrace the challenge on transition, on the SDG, on the adoption of SDG. But I think today, when cost of financing is 7 times that you see in developed world, it's a deep challenge for us in ASEAN. I think this is where, with Japan, it's important for us to look at transition finance, at de-risking. How do we come together to together benefit in the transformation? I think this will be one of the biggest outcomes we should look forward. And of course, on the human capacity side, as my fellow panelists have said, it's important. It's not just the young youth. I think we need to look after our workers in ASEAN. Many of them have actually need to be brought back and made into relevancy. So you have to bring about digital engagement with many of them. I think we need to look into ways to bring them back to become relevant, you know. As all businesses in ASEAN are looking to transform, you're not going to be able to afford IT professionals. You need to get your existing employees to be able to embrace sufficient amount of knowledge about digital transformation to help themselves. So I think there are some practical things we need to get on board in this next couple of years to help us. And then in terms of like data standards, and also at the same time in terms of being able to actually provide accreditations of where we stand, I think there's a lot happening around the world. The problem most of us in ASEAN, including Secretariat, faces is which standard? And the last thing we want to do is to embrace on a standard and get the whole of ASEAN to do where it's not going to become the global standard. I think this is where the whole world is moving together with us. We need to be smart. We need to move in a quick way, but at the same time in a nimble way. Not make quick decisions internally. We need to make decisions which are going to be universally able to put us right in the middle, connected to the world. Because what we are going to do is not just business within ASEAN, we need to do business with the rest of the world, you know. So we need to be very, very sharp in what decisions we make in terms of accreditation standards and how do we get ourselves connected globally, and also to bring our people together. Thank you.
Aizawa Sensei?
Yes, thank you very much. So talking about ASEAN-Japan cooperation, please don't look at like ASEAN here, Japan there. Like there's so many Japanese living in Southeast Asia. It's one of the biggest foreign community in Southeast Asia, and it's growing. The past 10 years in Thailand, it's 50% up during this 10 years of political turmoil in Thailand. So you will see how many Japanese are now choosing by their foot, voting by foot to Southeast Asia. Likewise, Southeast Asian people are the fastest growing members of Japanese community, Japanese society in Japan. So it's not, ASEAN is not here and there. Like we really, literally are neighbors. And so we really count on our friendship. So I think, you know, this panel really is the showcase of that. So, yes.
Thank you. James?
I would conclude, I think, with the reflection that the pandemic has really shown us the fragility of the development process and how difficult it is to really manage some of these global shocks that are quite transboundary. And I think the commemorative theme of friendship and cooperation, friendship between ASEAN and Japan, friendship with our close neighbors like Korea, China, friendship with also the US, who has been a reliable ally of ASEAN, is quite important. And especially I think for the external partners and dialogue partners of ASEAN, I think it's important that they also contribute more in terms of technical assistance and grant money to try to understand some of these technical hurdles and impediments that DSGS mentions, particularly how do we de-risk, how do we sweeten some of these, what are the innovative financing model that can really attract private capital, because that's really where the big gap is. I'll end there.
Can I just make one final recommendation, I think, and I speak to a lot of my friends in the ASEAN fraternity. I think what Japan has been able to do for us under JIVE is incredible. It's a fantastic amount of support. I think in the new era of our planning for the cooperation, I think there's a lot of scope for us to make it even more interesting, more flexible. I think we need to look at the processes that are involved in some of the way we put projects together, get them approved, that we might need to do some improvement. Only because it's moving so quickly. What we need to do in our next stage is going to move 3 times faster than what we've seen the last 10 years, So I guess we need to move with the times, and I think that will be my deep request to all of our colleagues from Japan, looking into how they can cooperate with ASEAN. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. And I also look forward to us moving 3 times faster than we have. So thank you so much to the panelists. And if you have any burning questions, you can approach the speakers during our coffee session, coffee break. But I will pass the floor back to the MCs. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Juwita Muhammad and honorable speakers. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, please give them a round of applause for the insightful discussion.
Ladies and gentlemen, before we start the second sessions, we will now have a very quick break. If you want to go to the restroom, please be back in 5 minutes as we will start the second session shortly. Once again, please be back in 5 minutes as we will start the second session shortly. Thank you. 1 menit lagi, Pak. Yes. Just a quick one, Mbak. So if you want to go to the restroom, please do so. Yeah. Sorry? Yeah. I know. That's why we have to rush in, Mbak. Test. Ladies and gentlemen, as we about to begin the second session, please be seated on your seats. And to all of you who are still outside of the room, please come back to the room as we will begin the second session. Thank you.
Karena gitu kalau ada break kita orang keluar cabut, jadi kayak mendingan nggak usah ada.
Gue nggak jadi.
Nah kenapa sih?
Maksudnya nanti sih pas ada
Iya,
orang.
pas kita ini aja pas kita lagi kayak untuk ini. Ini asyik-asyik ini harus bertugi.
Yeah, yes, we will do it now. Yeah.
I don't get it.
Kalau di sini mah udah aman yang di luar.
Boleh lah. Boleh lah kalau moderator, speaker, nyoba, Arima. Iya boleh. Itu gimana? Dah. Start now.
Test. Music.
Bisa mengundang komentar.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to begin the second session. To the operator, music please. Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will now have the second session on realizing regional peace and stability for the epicentrum of growth, how to make the most of ASEAN-led mechanisms and initiatives.
The second session will be moderated by Mr. Thomas Daniel, who is a senior fellow at ISIS Malaysia. So without further ado, I am pleased to invite Mr. Thomas Daniel to the floor. Please give a big round of applause.
Okay.
To all the participants, you may all be seated. Thank you.
Is the mic on? It is on, okay. I was going to say a good morning, but it's now a good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are here for the second session, and without wasting time, I would like to invite all the panel members up on the stage, Dr. Oba, Dr. Titinan, Mr. Yukata, and Dr. Marty. Please, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. I've been told by the organizers that we are allowed to stretch this slightly, and they will warn me when we have to bring this to a close. We're here for the second session on political security cooperation. Now, while the economic agenda drove a lot of ASEAN growth and cooperation, including with its dialogue partners, both ASEAN and its dialogue partners, including Japan, are faced with challenges and changing circumstances in the political security sphere. Now, for ASEAN, these are both internal and external in nature, which would impact how ASEAN member states potentially work with each other and how dialogue partners view the long-term value or viability of the regional organization and its associated mechanisms. For Tokyo, I think there is an ongoing thought process on how to reconceptualize its position and the policy options vis-a-vis the changing strategic security landscape that it now faces. And this will undoubtedly impact how Japan chooses to engage, or how the Japanese engagement with ASEAN will evolve. These are some of the issues that our speakers will address today. I'm going to ask them to speak in order of the listed of the run sheet of the program. I will ask all speakers to try to keep to 5 minutes for their opening remarks. I will then have a round of questions, and then if we have time, if the organizers allow it, we might take questions from the floor as well. So to kick us off, it is my pleasure to invite Dr. Oba, a professor at Kanagawa University, to take the floor first. Dr. Oba.
Yeah, good morning, Selamat pagi. So I'm so glad to be here and have opportunity to talk about the future of the new ASEAN-Japan partnership regarding the security and the political security. And then that my time is limited. I will start. So first of all, so I have to point out that the ASEAN and Japan are facing the very many challenges so regarding security and the politics. So in the area, I mean the Indo-Pacific. The first one is, of course, the escalation of the great power rivalry between China and the United States. So it makes the regional order so uncertain. So now, ASEAN-Japan have to deal with such uncertainty. So such a great rivalry is leading to the erosion of the free and open economic order, which had provided the economic prosperity in the region. So, and the unilateral action of China to violate the status quo in the South China Sea and the East Asian Sea. So also very big threat to both of us. So, it's obviously a threat to the rule-based maritime order in the Indo-Pacific. So after the Russian invasion into the Ukraine, so 1 year ago, the further strengthen our security concern is particular over Taiwan. But on the other hand, Myanmar situation since the coup d'etat, in the February 2021, not only cast a serious problem on the role of the ASEAN, so in sustaining peace and stability in the Southeast Asia. So, but also on the rule-based order in the Pacific. The current Myanmar junta is obviously violating democracy and human rights. So I understand the ASEAN, so led by the Chia countries and Indonesia, have a great effort to solve this problem. So, but unfortunately, the situation in Myanmar do not improve yet. So beyond the Myanmar case, such a retreat of the democracy in the serious issue in all of the world, including some of the advanced countries. Some specialists tend to connect the escalating tension among the great powers and the retreat of the democracy in some countries and depict such a turbulent situation as a confrontation between the liberalism and authoritarianism. So, but I don't think I think it is oversimplification. So, the world is not black and white. So, it is a more complicated one. The countries all over the world are still interconnected with the web of the globalization. So, for example, the United States, the trade between the United States and China reached the highest score. So, this year. So, and global South countries are taking so cautious attitude toward great power competition, and the leader was global South, like India and Indonesia, so taking a comprehensive approach to both Russian and Ukraine. For example, so Indonesia, as a chair country of the G20, invited the foreign minister of Russia to the summit and allowed the president of Ukraine to deliver the speech by online. So in addition, Indonesia succeeded in adopting a joint communique as a result of the summit. It's a very impressive success of the Indonesia's initiative in the G20. But on the other hand, it is still up in the air. So to what extent the situation improved? So regarding the Ukraine and the war in Europe and the tension in this region. And then attention in this region. And so now, I move to the importance of the ASEAN-Japan cooperation. So before that, I want to emphasize the importance of the ASEAN. So of course, it's very easy to point it out, sorry. It's easy to point out the limitation of the ASEAN. So, but ASEAN, I think the ASEAN has a very important institutional asset. So for the regional stability and the prosperity, so for several decades. So, and then, the Japan should enhance to ASEAN as a framework to foster and sustain the fostered and rule-based international order. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Oba. You touched on all the difficult points there in your short remarks, including perhaps questions that some of us in Southeast Asia might not want to speak about because there is no real easy answer here. But then this is the delicate balancing game that we have to play. I think this leads to a fantastic segue to Dr. Titinan. I believe Titinan will be talking about the strategic contours that we have to face. Dr. Titinan, please.
Thank you very much, Thomas. And first, thank the organizers. There's no more mainstreaming that is successful than the FCPI, which is to really make foreign policy a household concept. So congratulations to Dr. Dino. Congratulations to the Japanese mission here. Look, very short time, in a few minutes, I just come to my conclusion first. The ASEAN-Japan relations, how the ASEAN-Japan relations will go will be up to Japan more than ASEAN. ASEAN at this stage, in my view, is at its weakest and most vulnerable along its trajectory over the last 50 years. So if you look back, we're at a commemorative kind of milestone, 50 years. 50 years ago, we were the same place. The region was divided. There was a superpower rivalry, competition, contest, and conflict between the Soviet Union, the United States. 50 years hence, up to now, we now have superpower rivalry in conflict and competition and conflict, trade and technology conflict. Against the Soviet Union, the US, was military, was not direct. US-China is direct, but it's not military, at least not yet. When ASEAN did well along the trajectory of the 5 decades, if you look at the 70s, 80s, 90s, although the region was divided, that period was formative. It was a period of ASEAN expansion. Eventually, the best run for ASEAN was the 1990s and 2000s. In order for ASEAN to manage to kind of maintain its central role, centrality, and to be effective and consequential, it needs the major powers to be in rough balance and at relative peace. When the major powers are not at relative peace and not in balance, ASEAN is in trouble. So we can see from the various divisions over the South China Sea, Russia, Ukraine, some countries abstain, some sign on to the resolutions. Myanmar has pitted 2 sides of ASEAN, calling for restoration of democratic dialogue and rule, and the others who are kind of inert and passive and letting it go. Now, if you look at ASEAN again, we've heard about work plans and programs and initiatives. There'll be no shortage of what ASEAN can do with Japan and so on. But I think the mainstreaming AOIP, I think has been a very clever, practical, pragmatic, operationalizable attempt, initiative, strategy. So if you mainstream AOIP, basically you are relaunching the AOIP, because AOIP was reactive to the Trump FOIP back in 2017, 2018. ASEAN had to come up with something to respond, and it came up with a 5-page AOIP, which was really a kind of a regrouping and reinforcing, re-emphasizing the ASEAN centrality, the ASEAN mechanisms, and so on. So I think when there's a priority to mainstream AOIP is effectively relaunching, re-centralizing ASEAN centrality, right? So I think that's a very good plan moving forward, but it needs a lot more than just mainstreaming in a conference, but putting it in practice. I think that there's a lot of commonality with FOIP of Japan, not FOIP of US, FOIP of Japan, and that's, I think, a lot of fertile ground to do a lot together moving forward. And my final point would be, it's more up to Japan than ASEAN, because ASEAN is divided within. Myanmar is a horror show. I mean, it's so dark and nasty. I mean, there's a violent, brutal, heinous military dictatorship in Myanmar, killing its own people. That's very much has divided ASEAN. But I just say, for Japan, I think the key issue is, to what extent does Japan want to pursue its own strategic autonomy? A third way, if you will. Not the US way, not the China way, but a third way. One example of the third way would be the CPTPP. And I think you can have the third way while having a little bit of a first way and putting up with the second way. But I think this is where the future lies for us in Japan, but also for the other major powers in the region, outside the US, outside China. And this is, I think, what ASEAN is looking for, and AOIP can be the basis of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Titinan. Our next speaker is Mr. Arima Yukata, the DG of the Southeast and Southwest Asia Department at MOFA Japan. Mr. Yukata, you've heard some of the key points that Dr. Titinan has mentioned. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you to at least try to make a response to some of them, because they are actually quite pertinent and quite on the mind of some of us here in Southeast Asia. But I also want to make a little bit of trouble for you by following up with by starting with a question. So there's going to be a lot of questions for you on the mainstreaming of the AOIP, as the foreign minister has mentioned. Is this something that Japan intends to pursue alone, or are you going to do this with like-minded dialogue partners of ASEAN? With that, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Thomas. Thank you very much for those questions. At the outset, I would like to express my most sincere appreciation to Dr. Dino and the Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia for organizing this event. This year marks the 50th anniversary of the establishment of relations between Japan and ASEAN, and we will have the regular Japan-ASEAN Summit in September, but in addition to that, in December, we'll have the Commemorative Summit in Tokyo, hosting all of the ASEAN leaders. And we very much look forward to putting out a new vision and a new plan of action, so to speak, for Japan and ASEAN. And this will be a good starting point for all of that. And Thomas has given me two difficult questions to answer. But if I may go over, try to answer those questions while following what I've briefly prepared for the opening remarks. I am truly delighted to participate in this panel discussion with distinguished panelists. Japan and ASEAN have enjoyed excellent relations for the last 50 years. It was in 1977 that Prime Minister Fukuda laid out the Fukuda Doctrine. First, it was never to be a military power again. Second, it was to be a true friend of ASEAN with heart-to-heart relations. And third, it was to be an equal partner to ASEAN. In the years since, ASEAN has made significant political and economic progress in establishing a peaceful region where the economy is growing at more than 5% now. And Japan has been with ASEAN every step of the way in relationship. That relationship has benefited both Japan and ASEAN. And I think Japan has been true to the Fukuda Doctrine. In terms of responding to the first question of if there are a third way, I think we have practiced the third way always, or at least we have tried to. We are an extremely strong ally of the United States, but we have approached ASEAN differently. To characterize it exactly, it would be a little bit different, but in a more moderate manner and on an equal partnership basis. Always respecting and listening to the views of ASEAN. Today, as we face the 50th commemorative year of ASEAN-Japan relations, the international community faces very difficult regional and global challenges, not only here, but also out in the rest of the world. ASEAN has issued the AOIP, the ASEAN Outlook on the Indo-Pacific, I believe in an effort to lead the shaping of their economy and security architecture and ensure that such dynamics will continue to bring peace, security, stability, and prosperity for the peoples of Southeast Asia, as well as the wider Indo-Pacific. Japan, on our side, has set out the vision of a free and open Indo-Pacific to realize a free and open international order based on the rule of law and securing peace and stability in cooperation with like-minded countries. Japan and ASEAN have issued a joint statement in 2020 and noting that the AOIP and Japan's FOIP share relevant fundamental principles in promoting peace and cooperation. ASEAN leaders adopted a declaration on mainstreaming AOIP last November. Foreign Minister Hayashi's main message today is that Japan will support the mainstreaming of AOIP. This is only natural as Japan supports ASEAN's centrality and unity. AOIP is based on principles like openness, transparency, inclusivity, and a rules-based network. Mainstreaming of AOIP will lead to a region that is free and open, where there is a rules-based international order. Now, going to Thomas's questions, there are many ASEAN-led mechanisms that bring together countries in the region that have a stake in how the Indo-Pacific region will evolve. The East Asia Summit brings together 18 countries, including Japan, China, Russia, India, and the United States. The ASEAN Regional Forum has North Korea as its member. These fora, and there's also the ADMM, where the defense ministers get together, the United States as well as Russian defense ministers. These four bring together countries with different interests to discuss very difficult issues, and they happen annually. The developments in Myanmar, South China Sea, the Korean Peninsula, and the Taiwan Strait directly affect the political and security situation in the region and need to be addressed by interested parties. Taking these issues up in the ASEAN-led mechanisms and following principles laid out in AOIP will certainly contribute to improving the circumstances surrounding these difficult issues. Japan will continue to be a good partner of ASEAN for mutual benefit. And in the lead up to the summit meeting in December, we hope to be able to launch a comprehensive strategic partnership with ASEAN. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. We now go to Dr. Marty, former Foreign Minister of Indonesia, no stranger to anyone in this room. Pak Marty, the floor is yours for a few minutes. I believe you wanted to really respond to the conversations that you have heard both here and in the previous session.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for the kind invitation, and thank you to the Japan's mission to ASEAN, as well as the Padino's APCI for organizing today's gathering. I have listened attentively throughout the morning to many important points that had been made, and really have been very much on a listening mode rather than necessarily expressing my own view. Just a couple of quick points, if I may, in this initial round. First, I wish to underscore the points that others have made in recognizing the important contributions of ASEAN-Japan's partnership to the peace and stability of our region. Others have spoken far more eloquently and with far greater authority than I could, and I wish to simply join in that expression. And the second point, which I don't have to go into too much detail, is in wanting to recognize that ours is a moment, is a time with rather serious challenges ahead of us. I sometimes use the term an arc of instability beckons, whether we are in the Northeast Asia, from Japan looking south, or Southeast Asia looking north. One can easily and readily identify potential conflict points. East China Sea, South China Sea, cross strait. In the past, Strait of Malacca was also a source of difficult situation. The Indian Ocean, the Pacific as well. So the list is quite an extensive one. And not only do we have all these potential conflict situations, we have difficult dynamics to contend with. Others have spoken of the China-US dynamic, but actually that is the most known one. Arguably, one can also cite, for instance, the difficult dynamics between India and China, which is not necessarily often recognized, but in the context of Indo-Pacific, this could become even more of a situation into the future. And obviously, Northeast Asia is a sub-region of a perfect storm. All the various manifestations of conflict is there, and not only in terms of bilaterals, but the nuclear weapon proliferation potential, etc., etc. However, the point that I wanted to make out of this gathering today is how can we proceed beyond describing those phenomena? Because each one of us in this room can very succinctly and yet comprehensively describe all the problems that we have, the challenges, and in most instances express concern. I think this has become almost an automatic response, expressing concern, expressing even a plea to be left alone in the case of ASEAN. That is, this has become an ASEAN's tendency in recent years. Leave us alone, don't make us, force us to choose. We don't have a proxy, bring your proxy conflict onto our situation, etc. But if we are to be impactful and relevant, policy leaders, policy makers have to go beyond describing events, beyond expressing exasperation. And in the case of Japan and ASEAN, how can we ensure that this partnership is fit for purpose for the next 50 years? And we not simply celebrate and revel in the current situation, but identify what are the key challenges, not only identify, but actually act on them. I have nothing negative to say about the AOIP and all the wonderful mainstreaming of the 4 priority areas. Perfectly, they are fantastic initiatives. go for it. I mean, this is important steps. My only question is, are these solutions looking for problems? Are we neglecting what is right in front of our very eyes? The reality that ours is a region susceptible to miscalculation, unintended conflict, even intended one, like the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Are we speaking to these challenges? Or are we doing everything other than that is right staring in our face? Because the experience of the past few years, to me, suggests geopolitics trumps everything. They weaponized functional cooperation, health, climate, the economy. So I think some of us may be in denial if we assume that we can simply press on with this functional cooperation and somehow it will transform our behavior in the traditional model and make us more responsible in our behavior. So I think countries like ASEAN and Japan must do something more than simply pursuing mainstreaming the four priorities of interest. They're fine, perfectly great, go for it. And they are in the pipeline. They are the type of cooperation that is almost like an automatic pilot. Come what may, these are all part of ASEAN's plans of action, etc., etc. But where are the gaps? Where are the gaps where leaders, when they congregate together in Japan in December, in November, ASEAN summits here, where can they make a difference? And I feel, others have spoken far more eloquently than I have earlier this morning, speaking of the trust and confidence between ASEAN and Japan. One area that there is obviously in short form today is trust among countries. And how can ASEAN and Japan proliferate, extrapolate their own experience elsewhere to ensure that we have whatever our differences, because all these problems that we have cited earlier, they are not new ones. South China Sea, East China Sea, India, China, they are not new, but they have been revived in recent years. Why is that the case? Are we having headwinds against diplomacy? That we have tended to remain silent when things are actually occurring, but we are not really addressing them. Just last week, because of the incidents over the balloon traveling over the United States, as a result, what had been much anticipated U.S. Foreign Secretary's visit to Beijing had been canceled. And that was one of the positives that came out of Bali meeting of the G20 sidelines. As it was being considered, as it was evolving, did ASEAN foreign ministers or ASEAN leaders or ASEAN whomever, do they speak collectively and readily in a timely fashion to make sure, look, don't be discouraged. Diplomacy must continue to be placed at the forefront. So my point is that, all those four priority points, they are fantastic. They should be pursued with vigor, with energy. But let's not forget the elephant in the room. All the geopolitical tensions and complex dynamics that's about in this part of the world, they have to be managed. And ASEAN, I think, traditionally, have not been shy in being out there using forums such as the ASEAN Regional Forum, East Asia Summit, ADMM+. We have the wherewithal. It's not as if we have to start from scratch. That is why I have a little bit of a footnote on the idea of mainstreaming AOIP, because I fear that we are like suggesting that we are starting from scratch, that we are reinventing the wheel. An outlook cannot be legislated by the promulgation of a declaration of a statement. It is a state practice. It has to be practiced. So you may have all kinds of statements coming out from a summit, but if there are events happening, whether it be North Korea launching missiles here and there, and we chose not to respond, then that centrality, that ASEAN matters that is now being proclaimed, will sound hollow. That is the point being that, in other words, the partnership must be fit for purpose. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And yes, we do have an intervention from Sirikata. Please, sir, go ahead.
Dr. Marti, thank you very much for a very straightforward, clear-eyed intervention. If we are going to talk about the elephant in the region, maybe we should talk about the elephant in the region. I think what is important is that there is an elephant that has grown, which sometimes do not want to conform to rules, norms, which have enjoyed for the last few decades. But I think the important point is that we are able to carry out business as we had been doing for the last, say, 50 years, according to the rules and norms that we have come to agree to over the years and that we have come to accustomed to. Japan has put out a new national security strategy. I won't go into the details of the strategy, but the main purpose is for us to have deterrence. Deterrence vis-a-vis the big elephant. There is a much smaller elephant as well, firing missiles left and right. But it is important to have deterrence so that there is room for diplomacy and discussion, and that might does not become right. I think for those issues, this is not a quiet, this is not a private room, but I think we are more quietly assisting the ASEAN countries help themselves. We have provided Coast Guard ships, and we have enhanced the Coast Guard capacity of several countries in the region. With the new national security strategy, we will be starting a program where it will be a grant aid, which will be where the beneficiary could be a military organization. This is all to assist enhance the capacity of the ASEAN countries to enhance deterrence. No one wants to go to war. No one wants a conflict. The disruption to our economy will be so great. It will be unimaginable what the consequences will be. I think respecting or mainstreaming AOIP and the principles that are behind the AOIP. As you say, the projects that are laid out in the 4 areas are projects that we have been carrying out, but we will re-emphasize them in those categories. But the principles laid out in the AOIP are principles we believe, when enforced, will lead to a rules-based international order. And I think ASEAN taking the lead in saying this. If we advocate FOIP, a lot of countries support FOIP directly, but some countries see it as choosing sides. But I think AOIP is ASEAN's its own making, and we very much hope that we'll be able to assist ASEAN in promoting the AOIP exactly for the purposes that I have just stated. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the two-fingered intervention, sir, and also for taking the questions that were posed to you almost at the beginning of your remarks. I think the organizers have told me there's about 5 minutes left, and I want to give a round of questions to other members of the panel. Perhaps I can start with both Dr. Titinan and Dr. Oba, if possible. Building on your remarks now. In ASEAN, there are nuances, there are disagreements on wedge issues like Myanmar, like the South China Sea, possibly on how ASEAN manages its relationship with Beijing and with DC. is there a meaningful way to move forward here beyond the lowest common denominator? Because that's what we've been doing for years now, and it does not seem to be moving much forward at all. And what are the approaches, Dr. Oba, that Japan could take to support ASEAN in such a venture? I leave it to the both of you to choose to answer either both or all of those questions first. Whoever wants to go first, please.
So the Myanmar issue, as well as the South China Sea issue, as maybe the ASEAN have to directly deal with this issue. I think so. But so. So I want to comment beyond such specific issues. So regarding the Japan's support, so towards ASEAN. So I think the mainstreaming of the AOIP should be the starting point. So to further foster the enhance the new ASEAN Japan partnership, but just the starting point, I think so. So because as the Dr. Natalega said, so I think that, of course, we should respect the AOIP. But so within the AOIP, only the maritime cooperation are there regarding the security cooperation. But so we have to cooperate beyond so maritime cooperation. Of course, maritime security are very, very important for us. And then so South China Sea and Eastern Sea, and there are many the maritime security issues are there. So and then so we have to cooperate. But so AOIP is, and on the other hand, is broad. But on the other hand, it's very narrow. And then so, and mainstreaming on the AOIP is, I know that now the Japanese government, so direction to wrap up the new partnership between the ASEAN and Japan, but as an academician, so it's apart from the government, I think, so we mean that Japan and the ASEAN have to make more broader partnership, so in the future. And then, so I think that it's a specific recommendation regarding the Myanmar issue. So I think the ASEAN so should set the special envoy of the ASEAN regarding the Myanmar instead of the special envoy of the ASEAN chair country. So because so ASEAN have to commit to this issue in the long term, in the long run. So and then so maybe the special envoy is ASEAN chair country to have only the 1 year term. It's too short. And then so durable and enduring commitment toward the Myanmar issue, required such a new framework to deal with this issue. And then so I guess.
Thank you. Dr. Marty has mentioned some very harsh, I think, geopolitical realities which bring up hard questions and hard choices for ASEAN and ASEAN-Japan relations. AOIP, in my view, it was a way of reiterating that all that is needed in the region in terms of initiatives, mechanisms, institutions to resolve, mitigate tension and conflict available within the ASEAN frame, right? So all the various forums from the APEC right down to the AAF, the EAS, ADMM Plus, and all the other mechanisms. So this is a way of reiterating and I think refocusing on ASEAN's role. And I think when ASEAN was more successful, it played this role, which is to be a broker, and then also a bridge. A broker meaning the ASEAN centrality, being the organizer of these various cooperative vehicles, and a bridge meaning that forums for dialogue partners, especially the major powers, to have a platform to communicate. And then also at the same time to be a buffer among the big powers, right? And that role, I think, was really, to me, the essence of the ASEAN centrality, the ASEAN's utility in the region. It was a strength and a weakness at the same time. It was strength because if it's allowed that role, broker, bridge, and buffer, then that would be good for the region in terms of promoting peace and prosperity. But if it's not allowed to play that role, if the major powers, and big elephants we're talking about, start to interfere, meddle, and divide up the region, then that becomes problematic for ASEAN. Moving forward, I mean, there are elephants that have already been mentioned, Myanmar, South China Sea, major thorny issues. I think that there are two ways. I mean, on the on the face of it and outward, there are so-called rules-based institutions and so on, and I think they have some limitations. I think that another way would be to look at the ASEAN itself. I think the ASEAN is facing some existential challenges now about what role, what place, how effective it will be moving forward. And I wrote something about, I've been thinking about, could there be an ASEAN kind of 5 core plus other members? If you take, as you mentioned, Thomas, the lowest common denominator, the bar is lowering itself, the bar is being lowered and lowered. The lowest is getting very low, and it's getting so low that it becomes ineffectual. So could there be some other modalities on Myanmar, for example? I mean, this is a serious, violent, existential crisis, not just for Myanmar, but for the region and the wider world. So you have a military coup. Military took over from a democratic regime fresh after the election. And then since then, there's been a civil war. And ASEAN has been unable to implement its 5-point consensus in any useful way. And that's mainly because of the Myanmar Tatmadaw military, SAC, the junta. So we need to think about, how to make ASEAN work again within ASEAN, for ASEAN. Otherwise, ASEAN cannot work outside. And this means, I think we have to think about what to do with Myanmar military, and which means that, do they need to be, there needs to be some consideration about some measures, some leverage. Otherwise, that is a crisis that will spiral, and it will undermine everything that ASEAN can look forward to in the future.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Titinan. This is a conversation that can go on, but there's about 2 minutes left on the clock, and I am aware that I'm standing between you and your lunch, which is probably the most egregious of ASEAN ways to ever break. But in saying that, I would like to give the last question and also to bring the session to a close to Pak Marty. Pak Marty, you've heard, you've heard your fellow panelists, you've heard, conversations about elephants, which no one seems to be able to recognize the name of this elephant or what it's called. But you've also heard, from Dr. Titinan that our lowest common denominator is really, at the stage of being almost ineffectual. I would like to ask you to sort of wrap this, to bring us home with this. Do you think ASEAN could still, is ASEAN in danger of losing its convening and its convincing power here in the long term that it once did? Thank you.
Well, let me just emphasize, when I use the term elephant in the room, I wasn't referring to a country. I was referring to the issue, the core issue, namely, in my view, the predominance of geopolitical dynamics as the central organizing, most influential factor in the ways countries behave nowadays, and how, despite our goodwill and good intent to have cooperation on health, on climate change, on SDG, whatever is the term nowadays, SDGs, geopolitics impact those cooperation. Look at G20 over the past 1 year of Indonesia's chairmanship, irrespective of the kind of wishes that we had at the beginning, Russia's invasion or action in Ukraine permeate and impacted the entire year of the G20 chairmanship. Geopolitics matter. And this is the elephant that I was referring to. That when we speak of ASEAN-Japan partnership for the next 50 years, or the AOIP, great. But let's not ignore the fact that we need to address the geopolitical dynamics. And I think for ASEAN, it is not for us to wait to be given a chance to be allowed to have a role. We have to assert and earn that role. We must prove our relevance. And this is where I think we have the wherewithal, to your question about convening power, at least we have a convening facilities, potential. ASEAN Regional Forum, the ASEAN Pluses, East Asia Summit, etc. It's all there. But those forums need to be given relevance, not simply a routine, yearly, annual gathering. There are some of us who may consider the convening of the event itself as a success. But going by Indonesia's past chairmanship of ASEAN, the impact has been far beyond the chairmanship year. Someone in the earlier session talked about RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, whose fruit we are now enjoying today. It was launched in 2011. More than a decade ago, the type of far-sighted, future-oriented, anticipatory vision that we began. So now, in 2023, I don't think we have much luxury, the luxury of being too far ahead, because we have right under our very nose for ASEAN, two issues that we must manage. One is, others have spoken of, which is Myanmar, and the other is the geopolitical tensions. Now, I am not personally a great believer in notions of, I'm a great believer in the right of self-defense. For countries to arm, modernize its capabilities, perfectly fine and justified and charter mandated. But at the same time, I think our region have developed in the way it has because we have developed an inclusive notion of security. A security not against one another, but a common security. A security that is obtained not necessarily through military armament only, but through diplomacy and the like. We are seeing now elsewhere in different parts of the world a very different type of setting where security situation becomes the way it has. Now, ASEAN and Japan have been beneficiaries of a certain definition and outlook and approach on security. And I hope in the next 5 decades, we continue to have the courage to see that vision through and not to abandon midship by pursuing modalities that will see our region dissected between one group is the other. For ASEAN, I think my final point, a simple plea, if that is the right term, for ASEAN leaders to this coming year to openly, amongst themselves, reinforce the point, irrespective of their differences, they are going to solve all their problems through dialogue and diplomacy. First level, ASEAN. The second level, ASEAN and its partners do the same. A simple ASEAN leaders press statement to say we have huge problems, intractable problems, but we resolve to solve them by diplomacy. Clear. Nothing fanciful, but it will have an immediate decompressing effect. risk of miscalculation, risk of misunderstanding. But I am glad amidst all this, we have one pillar, the ASEAN-China pillar, pillar that is strong and vibrant. And my plea is that as we commemorate the 50 years of ASEAN-Japan, we reflect on what had worked in the past and reinforce that what had worked, and not to be driven by contemporarism and pursue certain paths that may lead us in a direction that we do not wish, because Japan has a huge assets in our part of the world, the trust and confidence that we have, and we would like very much to be part of, continue this wonderful partnership. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you very much. There is certainly quite a lot to chew on as we head out to the closing speech and for lunch. It just remains for me to say that it has been a pleasure and also pressure to moderate such an esteemed panel. Please join me in my appreciation to our speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas Daniel and honorable speakers. And ladies and gentlemen, once again, please give them a round of applause for the very insightful discussion.
Ladies and gentlemen, to close our event today, I am pleased to invite the co-host of today's event, the Ambassador of Japan to ASEAN, Mr. Kiya Masahiko, to deliver his remarks. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Excellencies, ambassadors, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Let me first express my sincere appreciation to all of you for kindly sparing your precious time to take part in today's kickoff event in Jakarta to celebrate together the 50th year of ASEAN-Japan Friendship and Cooperation. I'm greatly encouraged by a big turnout and extremely grateful for your warm support. In particular, the speakers and moderators made their valuable contributions to make the most of this important occasion to further deepen ASEAN-Japan cooperation for promoting peace, stability, and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region and beyond, like geopolitics matter. I would also like to express my special thanks to Dr. Dino Patti, founder of FPCI, and his team for co-hosting this event and making it more successful. It's an excellent management. Thank you very much. And as we get together to work for the future of ASEAN-Japan cooperation, it is very important to look back on our history. ASEAN has been so successful in advancing the vision and making it a reality step by step, as many mentioned. And as ASEAN faced and overcame successive challenges of conflicts and crises over decades, Japan has always been there as a partner that worked side by side with ASEAN, supporting their own efforts to strengthen their solidarity and resilience. Japan will do the same as ASEAN addresses new challenges through their own initiatives. AYP is definitely one of them, but many more initiatives are coming. Japan will keep listening to the voices of ASEAN and their people, and will always respond positively. And it is the next generation that is so important for ASEAN and Japan. Today, we invited 30 students to the symposium among 200, and many more are watching the live stream online across the region and the world. The youth is a source of hope for our future. We must double down on promoting people-to-people exchanges, links, and culture exchanges, with the greatest possible focus on the youth. This will be a testament to a long-standing heritage of our heart-to-heart relationship of mutual trust, inscribed in the Fukuda Doctrine in 1977. 40 years later, that is the 50th anniversary of ASEAN in 2017. ASEAN leaders' declaration said as follows: we look to the next 50 years and beyond, confident in our ability to build on our past achievements and address future challenges effectively as one ASEAN community. This is exactly what I envision for a solid ASEAN-Japan friendship and cooperation. I think that's exactly what the Honorable Prime Minister Marty said. We expand and trust to be expanded to address this geopolitics. So let us work together, not only for ASEAN and Japan, but also for the Indo-Pacific region and the world. Not only for the people living today, but also for the people who will live in another half a century and beyond. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you enjoy good Japanese and ASEAN foods over there waiting for you for our luncheon reception. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Kia, for your remarks. And ladies and gentlemen, I think we can all agree that we have learned a lot from our discussions today. And so with that, we have come to the end of the Commemorative Symposium for the 50th year of ASEAN-Japan Friendship and Cooperation. And you may notice a questionnaire that we have placed on your table. We would appreciate it if you could fill it out and submit it at the collection box at the registration table outside.
Yes, once again, please fill out the questionnaires and submit them at the registration tables outside. Thank you to all participants who have joined us and for your participations today. I'm sure we're all hungry, right, Kiara?
Yes.
Yes, and as the Ambassador Kia has said that we have Japanese and ASEAN foods for you, we would like to invite all of our guests who are here today to stay for a luncheon receptions, which is available on the room next door. On behalf of the organizing committee, we thank you.
We hope to see you again at our subsequent events, and we wish you all a pleasant day. Thank you.